During a covert mission in a war-torn region, Captain Adrian Cole discovers a gravely injured child named Elias amid the ruins of a bombed village. Defying orders, he saves the boy, unaware that decision will unravel a military secret buried deep within the shadows of his own past. As enemy forces close in, Adrian learns that Elias isn't an ordinary child, but the key to a powerful experiment linking man and machine. Torn between duty and humanity, Adrian must choose between obedience and conscience in a battle that tests the limits of loyalty, sacrifice, and what it truly means to be human. The air smelled like burnt steel and rain. Captain Adrian Cole pressed his back against the shattered wall of what used to be a school, his rifle held tight, the weight of ash and silence pressing down on him harder than his gear. The battle had ended hours ago, at least that's what command claimed. But the quiet after a firefight always felt wrong, as if the ground itself was holding its breath. "Sector Delta clear," Sergeant Blake Moran reported, stepping through the debris, scanning with his rifle. His voice crackled through the comms. "No movement. No heat signatures." Adrian nodded, his jaw set. "Sweep again. Civilians. Negative. Just ruins." Adrian exhaled slowly, looking around the skeleton of the village. Once it had been alive. He could see remnants of it in the small things: a child's drawing half buried in dust, a toy truck melted into the asphalt, a shoe too small to belong to any soldier. He looked up at the sky, gray, heavy, distant. The storm clouds hung like judgment. "Command said to regroup in 15, Blake reminded him. "Your bleeding time, Captain." Adrian ignored him, moving deeper into the wreckage. He had learned long ago that command didn't see the field. They only saw numbers, coordinates, casualties, targets. But here, in the dirt and smoke, it wasn't numbers. It was faces. "Cole," Blake called after him. "Orders were clear. No civilians. The perimeter is hot. We need to fall back." Adrian's boots crunched on broken glass as he stepped into what had once been a classroom. Desks overturned, a chalkboard cracked down the middle, the faint smell of chalk still clinging to the air like a ghost. Then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost thought he imagined it. A whimper. He froze. "Blake, hold position," he whispered, raising his hand. The sound came again, weak, strained, like the smallest breath. It was coming from behind a pile of rubble in the far corner. Adrian slung his rifle to his back and crouched low, moving carefully. The rubble shifted as he reached it, a soft cry escaping from beneath. He pulled a piece of concrete aside, then another. And then he saw him. A boy. No older than 8. Covered in dust, his small frame curled protectively around something clutched to his chest, a tattered photo, smeared with ash. His face was streaked with blood, his lips trembling, eyes barely open. "Jesus," Adrian whispered. The boy tried to move, but a sharp gasp escaped his mouth. His leg was pinned under a concrete beam. "Blake!" Adrian barked. The sergeant was at his side within seconds, eyes widening when he saw the child. "Sir, we can't. Help me lift it." "Adrian, we have orders." Blake hissed. "No civilian extractions. We're on enemy soil." Adrian shot him a look that silenced argument. "He's still breathing. That's all I need." Together they heaved against the beam until it shifted enough for Adrian to pull the boy free. The child cried out once, then went limp in his arms. His pulse was weak, erratic. "Pressure wound on his thigh," Adrian said, checking quickly. "We can stabilize him." Blake's jaw clenched. "Command's not gonna like this." Adrian looked down at the boy, the dirt smeared across his face, the small hand still clutching the photograph. "Command doesn't have to like it. Get the med kit." As Blake worked, Adrian glanced at the photo the boy had been holding. It was faded but clear enough, a man in uniform, smiling, holding the same boy on his shoulders. There was a military insignia on the man's sleeve, not from their army. Enemy uniform. Adrian's stomach turned. "Sir?" Blake asked, noticing his hesitation. "Nothing," Adrian said quickly, slipping the photo into his vest. "Let's move. We'll take him to the evac point." Blake grabbed his arm. "Adrian, think this through. You bring him in, they'll court-martial you." The colonel's orders were explicit: no contact, no civilians, no interference. Adrian met his eyes. "If I leave him here, he dies." "That's not a rule, that's murder." Blake's voice lowered, pleading. "You can't save everyone. You taught me that." "Maybe I was wrong," Adrian said, lifting the boy carefully. "Maybe that's what's been killing us all along." They moved fast, keeping low through the smoke. Every corner felt like an ambush waiting to happen. The child's shallow breaths were hot against Adrian's chest, too light to be reassuring. They reached the extraction zone, a half-collapsed church marked as Rally Point Echo. Blake secured the perimeter while Adrian radioed command. "This is Cole, Unit Delta 3. Requesting medevac for a civilian casualty." Static. Then a voice crackled back, sharp and cold. "Negative. Delta 3. No civilian extractions authorized. Confirm and proceed to exfil." Adrian gritted his teeth. "He's critical. A child. I repeat, a child." "Negative," the voice repeated. "Leave the body and return to base." For a moment, the only sound was the rain starting to fall. Soft, steady, relentless. Adrian clicked off the comm. Blake stared at him. "What did they say?" Adrian looked down at the boy. "They said he's not our problem." Blake sighed heavily. "So what now?" Adrian adjusted the boy in his arms. "Now he is." They crossed into the tree line under cover of dusk, making their way toward an abandoned supply post 3 clicks south. The boy's breathing had grown shallower, his skin pale as frost. "Stay with me, kid," Adrian whispered, half to himself. Blake moved ahead, scanning the ridge. "We can patch him up there, but after that? You can't hide this from command forever." "I don't plan to," Adrian said. "Once he's stable, we'll figure it out." Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the horizon, and in that brief light, Adrian saw movement. 2 figures, far ahead, watching them. "Contact," he hissed, ducking low. Blake raised his weapon. "Where?" "North Ridge. 2, maybe 3. The figures disappeared into the tree-line. Adrian's instincts screamed. "We're being tracked." They broke into a sprint, weaving through trees. The boy stirred faintly, murmuring in a language Adrian didn't recognize. Soft, rhythmic, almost rehearsed. Then he said something that made Adrian's blood run cold. He whispered his name. "Adrian." The captain froze mid-stride. The boy's eyes flickered open, a strange glassy blue that seemed to reflect the world around him. "How do you—" A gunshot tore through the air. Blake shouted, "Down!" and fired back. The boy's head fell against Adrian's chest, breathing faint but steady. Somewhere beyond the trees, a voice shouted in the dark, words Adrian couldn't make out, but one thing was clear. They weren't just being followed. They were being hunted. Rain hammered against the forest canopy as Captain Adrian Cole crouched behind a fallen tree, his breath fogging in the cold air. Beside him, Sergeant Blake Moran scanned the tree-line through his scope, eyes sharp, every muscle coiled. Somewhere out there, someone was tracking them. And it wasn't just enemy scouts. The way they moved, silent, coordinated, precise, felt like a trained unit. Not locals. Not militia. Military. "Nothing on thermal," Blake whispered, wiping rain from his visor. "They're ghosts." Adrian adjusted the boy's weight in his arms. Elias, that's what he'd decided to call him, though the child hadn't confirmed anything. He was barely conscious, feverish, whispering disjointed words in a mix of languages. Sometimes Arabic. Sometimes Russian. Once, even English. "Let's move," Adrian said quietly. "They're herding us toward the ridge." "Ridge leads straight to the ravine," Blake reminded him. "No cover." "Exactly. They'll expect us to avoid it." Blake frowned. "So we go through it." Adrian nodded once, gripping his rifle. "We're not outsmarting them. We're outlasting them." The descent toward the ravine was steep and slick, every step a gamble on the wet rocks. Elias whimpered softly, his small hands clutching at Adrian's vest. "It's okay, kid," Adrian whispered. "We're getting you somewhere safe." The words felt empty even as he said them. Safe wasn't a word that meant anything anymore. Not here. Not in this war. Blake halted suddenly, raising a hand. Movement. 3 o'clock. Adrian dropped behind a boulder, motioning for silence. Through the mist, faint figures appeared, black-clad, helmets glinting faintly in the rain. Their gear looked too clean, too advanced for local insurgents. One of them carried a scanning device, sweeping the ground methodically. "Infrared tracker," Blake murmured. "They're locking onto our heat trail." Adrian's pulse quickened. "They're not enemy troops." Blake glanced at him. "Then who the hell are they?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "Someone who doesn't want this kid found." They waited until the patrol moved out of sight, then slipped down the ridge and into the ravine, water running ankle-deep beneath them. By the time they reached the old supply bunker, night had swallowed the valley. The bunker was half buried in mud, the door rusted but intact. Adrian pushed it open with a groan of steel. "Inside," he ordered. Blake went first, clearing corners. The air was thick with dust and oil, the faint smell of fuel and decay clinging to the walls. Adrian laid Elias on a tarp near the back. The boy's breathing was shallow, his forehead slick with sweat. Blake knelt beside him, shaking his head. "He's not gonna make it without real medical." "Then we find some," Adrian said firmly. "There's a mobile medic unit at the eastern checkpoint." Blake looked at him. "That checkpoint's 3 clicks away. We can't move him through that fire zone." "Then I'll go alone," Adrian said. "Adrian!" End of discussion. Blake stared at him, then finally nodded. "Fine. But if you're not back in 2 hours, I'm moving him myself." Adrian gave him a tight smile. "Fair enough." Before leaving, he tucked the photo, the one the boy had been holding, into his vest. He didn't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe something about it felt like a key he hadn't yet found the lock for. The forest was quieter now, but not peaceful. Every shadow felt alive, every rustle an enemy. Adrian moved with the practiced caution of a soldier who'd been hunted before. His night vision goggles painted the world in ghostly green hues. The rain had turned the terrain slick and treacherous. Twice he slipped, catching himself on roots. He was halfway to the checkpoint when the comms in his ear buzzed to life. "Captain Cole, this is Colonel Hargrove. Stand down immediately." Adrian froze. "Command channel? How the hell did you—" "Your beacon's still active, Captain. You disobeyed direct orders and extracted an unauthorized civilian. Return the subject immediately." The word subject made Adrian's stomach turn. "Sir, it's a child," he said. "Injured, unarmed. He's not a threat." "That's not for you to decide," Hargrove's voice snapped. "You're in violation of Article 12 and endangering the mission. Do you copy?" Adrian clenched his jaw. "I copy." But he didn't turn back. He killed the comms link and pressed forward. Inside the bunker, Blake kept watch by the door, rifle across his knees. Elias stirred again, muttering something in a low, broken voice. Blake turned, frowning. "Hey, kid, take it easy." The boy's hand twitched. His eyes opened suddenly, wide, unfocused, glowing faintly blue in the dark. Blake froze. "What the hell?" The light faded as quickly as it appeared. Elias gasped once and went still again, falling back into unconsciousness. Blake sat back slowly, staring. Christ almighty! He didn't notice the faint hum coming from the child's chest until the sound of an approaching drone drowned it out. Adrian heard the drone before he saw it, a low, mechanical buzz growing louder through the rain. He ducked behind a tree, watching its searchlight slice through the darkness. It was standard reconnaissance, but its path was deliberate. It was tracking a beacon. "Not mine," he realized. He sprinted back toward the bunker. Blake was on his feet when Adrian burst through the door. "They found us," Adrian said, panting. "We've got a tracker on the kid." Blake gestured to Elias. "You're damn right we do. He's not normal, Adrian." His eyes. Adrian dropped to his knees beside the boy. "Where?" "Under his shirt," Blake said. "I think it's under the skin." Adrian pulled out his knife, hands shaking as he cut through the torn fabric. Beneath the boy's ribs, faint blue light pulsed from under the flesh, a small embedded device, no larger than a coin. "Jesus!" Adrian whispered. They tagged him like property. Before he could remove it, the bunker shook. Explosion. Close. Move. Blake shouted. They grabbed the boy and dove behind a steel crate as the front door blew inward. Dust and fire filled the air. Figures stormed in, laser sights sweeping. Blake fired first, dropping one. Adrian rolled behind cover, returning fire. The air was chaos, bullets, smoke, shouts. Go! Blake yelled. Get the kid out. I'm not leaving you. Damn it, Adrian, G.O. Another explosion ripped through the roof. Adrian grabbed Elias and sprinted through the back exit as the bunker collapsed behind them. The last thing he saw before diving into the mud was Blake, standing his ground, firing until the smoke swallowed him whole. Hours later, under the dying storm, Adrian knelt beside a stream, drenched and shaking. Elias lay beside him, unconscious but alive. The tracker still glowed faintly beneath the boy's skin. Adrian stared at it, his reflection distorted in the water. The boy wasn't just an innocent victim. He was the reason for the war. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was worse. Captain Adrian Cole sat under the half-collapsed overhang of an abandoned checkpoint, his back against the concrete wall, rifle across his knees. The boy, Elias, lay wrapped in Adrian's torn field jacket, pale but breathing steadily now. The faint blue glow under his skin had dimmed, though it still pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat made of light. Adrian hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sergeant Blake Moran, his closest friend, standing in that bunker doorway, firing until the explosion took him. He should have gone back. He wanted to go back. But the boy was still alive. And Blake had made that choice for him. The wind whistled softly through the holes in the wall. Somewhere in the distance, artillery rumbled, dull, rhythmic, constant. Adrian checked the battery on his comms device again. Dead. It hadn't connected since the base went dark. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out the photo, the one Elias had been clutching when he'd found him. A man in a military uniform. The same strange insignia. The same eyes as Elias. He turned it over. On the back, written in faint ink, were coordinates. He memorized them instantly. That's where he'd find the truth. By midday, Adrian had found a working truck half buried in mud near a blown bridge. The engine coughed but caught after a few tries. He lifted Elias into the passenger seat, tightening the boy's makeshift bandage. "You hang in there, kid," he muttered. "We're not done yet." The boy stirred faintly, his voice dry and broken. "Where are we going?" Adrian blinked. The first coherent words he'd spoken. "To find out who you are." Elias's eyes fluttered open, gray-blue, eerily intelligent for someone his age. "You already know. What's that supposed to mean?" Adrian asked, frowning. Elias just stared at him, expression unreadable. Then he whispered, "They made you too." The words hit like a blade. Adrian tightened his grip on the wheel. "You're confused. You've lost blood." "No," the boy said softly. "You're like me." Adrian pressed the gas harder, the tires spitting mud. "We'll talk when you're stronger." But Elias just leaned back, closing his eyes again, murmuring something under his breath, numbers, sequences, in a steady rhythm. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. Adrian recognized it. He'd heard it before. Back in Syria. During Operation Black Echo, when his entire unit's comms had been hijacked moments before the ambush. That same numerical sequence had echoed through the static then, like a voice hidden in code. It wasn't a coincidence. They drove through the night, stopping only for fuel and cover. The coordinates led them to an area deep in the demilitarized zone, an area marked Restricted NO Entry on every digital map. The landscape changed as they approached, a long stretch of barren earth fenced with rusted barbed wire. Old structures jutted from the ground like bones, and in the center stood a concrete complex buried halfway into the earth. No signs. No flags. No life. Adrian parked the truck behind a ridge and looked through his scope. The facility wasn't abandoned. Guards patrolled the perimeter, silent, methodical, armed with gear that screamed Black Ops. "Whoever you are, kid," he muttered, "you were never meant to leave this place." He turned to Elias, who was now fully awake, though pale. "Does this look familiar to you?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. "They called it the nest." "The nest. It's where I was born." Adrian's breath caught. "Born?" Elias's gaze didn't waver. "Not like you think." As night fell, Adrian and Elias crawled through a drainage pipe that ran beneath the fence. The smell of rust and rot filled the air. Adrian moved first, keeping his rifle ready. The boy followed silently, almost too silently for a child his age. When they emerged inside the perimeter, Adrian spotted an old service door. The keypad was dead, but Elias reached out and pressed his hand against the metal. The lock clicked open. Adrian froze. "How did you—" "I remember codes," Elias said simply. "They're in my head." They stepped inside. The corridor was long and sterile, lined with flickering fluorescent lights. It smelled of disinfectant and something else, ozone, maybe. The hum of hidden generators filled the silence. As they moved deeper, Adrian's flashlight swept over walls lined with glass windows. Behind each window were empty rooms, metal tables, restraints, shattered equipment. One door still had a sign intact: Biogenesis, Phase 4. Adrian's stomach twisted. He pushed the door open. Inside were rows of cryotubes, each one labeled with names and serial numbers. Most were shattered, their contents long gone. But one remained intact, faintly glowing blue. On its tag, etched in silver letters, was a familiar name. Cole, Adrian, Series 3A. Adrian staggered back, his pulse hammering. What is this?" he whispered. Elias stood beside him, expression calm but sad. "You were part of the program. Project Genesis. They created you to lead, to fight without hesitation. But something went wrong." Adrian's voice cracked. "I'm not." "You are," Elias interrupted softly. "You were the prototype that learned compassion. You weren't supposed to care." Adrian stared at his reflection in the cryoglass, his own haunted eyes staring back. He felt sick. "They lied to me. They lied to all of us." Elias reached out, touching the tube. "You're different. That's why you survived." Adrian turned to him. "And you? What are you?" "I was their failsafe," Elias said. "A living encryption key. My DNA carries the codes to control every Genesis soldier. That's why they want me back." Adrian's head spun. The war, the missions, the secrecy, it all made sense now. They weren't fighting for territory or politics. They were fighting to control evolution. The boy looked up at him. "That's why you saved me. It's written in you, to protect the asset." Adrian shook his head. "No. I saved you because you're human." Elias's eyes softened. "That's what makes you dangerous." Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed through the corridor. "They found us," Adrian said, pulling his rifle. Elias didn't flinch. "They'll kill you if you try to protect me. Then they'll have to go through me first." They ran through the maze of corridors as armed soldiers poured in from both ends. Adrian fired controlled bursts, dropping the first wave, grabbing Elias by the arm. "This way!" he shouted. They burst into a control room filled with screens showing live feeds from the facility. On one monitor, Adrian froze, Colonel Marcus Hargrove's face. The same commanding officer who'd ordered him. The rain had stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse than the thunder ever was. Captain Adrian Cole crouched beside the burned-out wreck of a transport truck, his uniform caked with mud and blood, his pulse thudding with exhaustion. The boy, Elias, lay wrapped in a thermal blanket nearby, chest rising and falling weakly. Adrian couldn't shake the image of Sergeant Blake Moran, his closest friend, standing in that collapsing bunker, firing until the world went white. He'd broken every rule. And for what? To save a boy who wasn't even human. He still remembered the moment it became undeniable. When he'd finally cut open the faint blue glow beneath Elias's ribs, he found not a tracker, but a lattice of circuitry, organic and synthetic, fused like veins of light under his skin. He wasn't tagged. He was built. And the insignia etched on the implant's casing? Echo Wraith Division, the same classified project Adrian had been part of 3 years earlier. That realization had shattered everything. Elias wasn't the reason the war started. He was the weapon that could end it. "Command knows," Adrian muttered to himself, watching the horizon. The hum of distant engines grew louder. "They'll burn everything to keep this buried." From behind him, a tired voice croaked. "You're bleeding." Elias had woken, his blue-gray eyes dull but alert. Adrian glanced down at the cut across his forearm, still oozing. "It's nothing." The boy tilted his head slightly, then pressed a hand to Adrian's arm. A faint light shimmered under his palm. Within seconds, the bleeding stopped. The wound closed like it had never been there. Adrian pulled back, stunned. "How did you?" The boy looked down. "It's not healing. It's replication. The nanites repair what they recognize." Adrian stared at him. "Nanites? You know what you are." Elias hesitated. "Not everything. Fragments. I was part of something called Genesis Protocol." Adrian's breath caught. "That's impossible. Genesis was terminated." Elias shook his head faintly. "No. It evolved." Hours later, Adrian found the old comms tower at the edge of the valley, half destroyed, but still standing. If he could reach Dr. Liana Reed, the field medic who'd helped him before the mission went dark, maybe he could get answers. He activated the tower's backup power and tapped into the encrypted channel. Static crackled, then a familiar voice came through, weary but urgent. "Adrian, God, where have you been? Command's hunting you. Your unit's listed Kia." "Liana, listen to me. I have someone, a child." "They know," she interrupted. "They've declared you rogue. They're saying you defected with enemy tech." "He's not tech," Adrian snapped. "He's alive." Silence on the line. Then quietly, "You found him, didn't you? The prototype." Adrian froze. "You knew." "Not everything. They told us the project failed. Echo Wraith's neural mapping program was shut down after the incident in Syria." "The incident," Adrian said bitterly. "You mean the slaughter." "Adrian, listen, Elias isn't just a weapon. He's the interface. He can link directly with autonomous drone fleets, rewrite them, control them. He's a living override key. If Command gets him back, they'll restart the entire program." Adrian's stomach turned. "They already have." "Then you have one choice," she said softly. "Destroy the link inside him before they reach you." Adrian looked toward the boy, who was sitting quietly by the tower's edge, staring at the sky. His small fingers traced the air as if drawing invisible patterns. "Destroy it," Adrian said. "He's not a machine. He's just a kid." "He's both," Liana said. "And that's what terrifies them." Before Adrian could respond, the line crackled violently, static erupting. "Adrian, they've triangulated your—" The signal died. Then came the low whine of approaching aircraft. Elias stood suddenly, his face paling. "They're coming." "How do you know?" "I can feel them." Adrian's instincts kicked in. "We move. Now." They raced into the woods as the first drone broke through the clouds. Floodlights slicing across the terrain. Behind it, armored transports barreled down the ridge. "Keep your head down," Adrian shouted, pulling Elias behind a tree. Bullets tore through branches above them. "Why are they shooting?" the boy cried. "Because you're the one thing they can't control." They ran until the forest opened into an old fuel depot. Adrian ducked behind a rusted tank, panting. "We can't outrun them." Elias looked up, expression distant. "Maybe we don't have to." "What are you?" The boy's eyes flickered blue. The air hummed. The drone overhead froze mid-flight, its lights dimming. Then, slowly, it turned, facing the approaching transports. Adrian's mouth went dry. "You're controlling it." Elias trembled. "I can make them stop." The drone unleashed a barrage of missiles, not at Adrian, but at the convoy. Fire erupted along the ridge, explosions lighting the night. Adrian shielded the boy, the heat washing over them. "Elias, stop." But the boy didn't hear him. His entire body glowed faintly, veins of light crawling up his neck. The drones in the sky multiplied, 5, 10, 20, swarming like locusts, awaiting his command. "Elias!" Adrian grabbed him, shaking his shoulders. "You'll kill everyone." The glow faded. The drones fell from the sky like dying birds. The boy collapsed, unconscious. By dawn, the fires still burned across the horizon. Adrian sat beside the boy, guilt eating through his chest. He had watched a child unleash the kind of power armies dreamed of controlling. And worse, he'd seen that same child cry afterward, whispering through tears, "I didn't mean to hurt them." He'd broken every military code, every order. But looking at Elias now, small and shivering under the gray light, he couldn't see a weapon. Only a scared boy who never asked to exist. The sound of rotor blades broke the silence. A gunship approached, hovering above the clearing. Loudspeakers crackled. "Captain Adrian Cole. This is Colonel Marcus Hargrove. Stand down. We have the target in sight." Adrian stiffened. "Hargrove. The man who gave the order to bomb the village. You did well, Captain. Hand over the asset, and I'll make sure this doesn't end your career." Adrian glanced at Elias. The boy's eyes fluttered open. "You're not giving me back, are you?" Adrian shook his head slowly. "Not a chance." The helicopter's side hatch opened, and soldiers began rappelling down. Adrian raised his weapon. "Stay behind me." "Last warning, Cole," Hargrove's voice boomed. "You can't win this." Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger. "Wasn't trying to." Gunfire erupted. He took out two before ducking behind cover, bullets sparking against metal. "Elias!" he shouted over the chaos. "Run!" But the boy didn't move. He was staring at the helicopter, eyes glowing again, brighter this time. "Elias, no!" The gunship's engines whined, then screamed. The rotors seized, metal warping. Within seconds, the craft spiraled out of control and crashed in a roaring explosion. The shock wave knocked Adrian backward. When he looked up, the sky was on fire. Elias stood at the center of the chaos, trembling, blue light flickering across his skin like lightning under glass. Adrian's heart broke at the sight. "You're killing yourself." The boy turned, tears streaking through soot. "I can't stop it." And then, just before collapsing into Adrian's arms, he whispered, "You have to finish what they started, or it'll never end." As smoke filled the air and the fire burned higher, Adrian looked down at the child in his arms, half human, half machine, entirely innocent, and realized the final order he had to give. Not to command. Not to anyone else. To himself. He would save the boy, even if it meant destroying everything that came before him. Smoke still hung over the battlefield like a wounded sky. Captain Adrian Cole staggered across the blackened ground, his uniform torn, his rifle gone, his arms clutching Elias, who was barely breathing. The boy's veins pulsed faintly with blue light beneath his skin, flickering weaker with each passing minute. The wreckage of the downed helicopter smoldered behind them. Bodies lay scattered, some his enemies, some his brothers in arms. The air reeked of burned metal and betrayal. Above it all, a single voice echoed through Adrian's calm, distorted but coldly alive. "You can't run forever, Captain." Colonel Marcus Hargrove. Adrian turned, teeth clenched, scanning the horizon. "You should have died in that crash." "You underestimate what we've built," Hargrove said. "You think Elias was the only one? He was just the prototype. A prototype that needs to be retrieved." Adrian's eyes darkened. "He's not your experiment anymore." "He's not yours either," Hargrove countered. "He belongs to the Genesis Initiative. To progress." Adrian glanced down at Elias. The boy's eyes fluttered open, faint but clear. "Don't let him take me," he whispered. Adrian's grip tightened. "I won't." He followed the sound of the colonel's voice, moving toward the broken communications tower that loomed over the ridge. Static crackled in his earpiece with every step. "You're still a soldier, Captain," Hargrove said. "Do you know what that means? It means you follow orders, even when they break you." Adrian gritted his teeth. "I stopped being your soldier the day I buried my conscience." When he reached the tower, the colonel was waiting. He stood surrounded by armed soldiers, clean, polished, untouched by the chaos. His uniform was immaculate, his expression carved from stone. "Captain Cole," he said smoothly, "you're a hard man to kill." Adrian lowered Elias onto the ground behind a broken wall and straightened, facing him. "You've been experimenting on children." Hargrove smiled faintly. "On evolution. Not children. They're the future. War without conscience. Soldiers without fear. Machines with human adaptability." Adrian took a slow step forward. "And what happens when you build something you can't control?" Hargrove's eyes flickered with pride. "That's why we built you. You were the failsafe. The human override. You were designed to destroy them if they ever became a threat." The words hit like a hammer. Adrian's voice went cold. "You made me to kill them." "To protect humanity," Hargrove corrected. "You were never meant to think. But you did. You disobeyed. You grew a conscience. That's why you failed in Syria. That's why Echo Wraith collapsed." Adrian's hands curled into fists. "I failed because I refused to kill innocent people. If that's weakness, then I'll wear it proudly." Hargrove raised his hand. "Then you'll die for it." The soldiers opened fire. Adrian dove behind the tower's base, bullets sparking off concrete. He fired back with precision, taking down 2 before rolling behind a steel crate. Through the chaos, he saw Elias stirring. The boy's eyes glowed again, brighter this time, like stars trapped in his veins. "Elias, no," Adrian called out. "Don't." But it was too late. The boy stood, trembling, and raised his hand. The ground shuddered as nearby drones and weapon systems powered up on their own. The soldiers' rifles jammed mid-fire. The very air hummed with static. Hargrove's calm cracked. "What are you doing, boy?" Elias's voice was soft but strong. "Ending this." "Stop him!" Hargrove screamed. Adrian ran to the boy, grabbing his shoulders. "Elias, you'll burn yourself out." The boy looked at him, tears glimmering in his strange blue eyes. "It's the only way. I can shut it all down, the drones, the networks, the programs. I can end Genesis." "You'll die," Adrian said desperately. Elias smiled faintly. "I was never alive like you." The light around him grew blinding, swirling in waves of blue and white. The soldiers dropped their weapons, shielding their eyes. The tower's circuits overloaded, sparks raining down like fireflies. Hargrove lunged forward, shouting, "No! We're so close!" Adrian turned on him, fury exploding through his chest. "You were never close to anything human." He slammed into Hargrove, tackling him to the ground. The colonel fought back hard, punching, clawing, trying to reach the weapon holstered at his side. "You can't stop it!" Hargrove roared. "He's not a boy, he's a bomb." Adrian's voice was low, final. "Then I'll go with him." He drove the knife from his belt into Hargrove's chest. The colonel's eyes widened, the fight leaving him instantly. Adrian looked up, blood mixing with rain and ash. Elias was glowing like a beacon now, the light consuming him. "Elias!" Adrian shouted, stumbling forward. "Listen to me. You're not just a weapon. You're the proof they were wrong. You're proof that we can choose who we become." The boy looked at him one last time, smiling through tears. "Then choose for me." Adrian hesitated. Then, slowly, he placed his hand over the glowing device embedded in the boy's chest. The light surged around them both. And then, silence. When Adrian opened his eyes, the world was still. The rain had stopped. The sky was gray but calm. The drones lay scattered, lifeless. The soldiers were gone. The air hummed faintly with fading static. Elias was lying motionless at his side. The blue light had vanished completely. Adrian touched his shoulder gently. "Elias." "Nothing." He sat there for a long time, cradling the boy, the battlefield around them eerily quiet. Then, a faint sound broke the silence, a voice crackling through the dead comms channel. "Captain Cole, this is Dr. Liana Reed. We've received the transmission. The Genesis data is gone. You did it." Adrian closed his eyes. "At what cost?" "The program's finished," she said softly. The world will never know what you did, but it will be safer because of it. Adrian looked down at Elias, brushing the dirt from his face. He wasn't a program, he whispered. He was a person. He stood slowly, lifting the boy in his arms, and began walking away from the ruins of the tower. The wind picked up again, carrying the scent of ash and rain. For the first time in years, Adrian felt something he hadn't known he was still capable of. Peace. Weeks later, in a classified recovery center, a technician sifting through encrypted military servers found something strange. A dormant file had reappeared inside the system, a single line of code pulsing softly in the dark. Echo_8, active, entity, Elias_C01. And beneath it, a second tag. Guardian, Cole_A03, online. In an undisclosed location, a man opened his eyes beneath the dim glow of an old sunrise. His arm bore a faint blue vein of light that faded almost immediately. He stood, disoriented but calm, and looked out across a quiet field of morning fog. Somewhere deep inside him, a voice, soft, young, and familiar, whispered, "You kept your promise." Adrian smiled faintly. "Guess we both broke the rules." Then he turned toward the horizon, walking into the dawn.